At 18, I thought college was my biggest worry, until I found my little brother trapping a 5-year-old in a closet just to see her face. When he assaulted his girlfriend and I reported him, our mom blamed me for the fallout. But I had proof he'd fooled us all, and exposing it meant tearing our family apart. You know how people talk about those moments when time freezes? That's not how it happened for me. Time didn't stop. It stretched, like taffy being pulled, making each second last just long enough for me to feel something break inside me, a fault line cracking open that would eventually split my whole life in two. For me, that moment came wrapped in 7 words, delivered so casually they might have been asking about the weather. Why don't people just lie to get what they want? I was sprawled on our threadbare couch that Tuesday afternoon, college brochures fanned across my lap. Bright futures printed on glossy paper I couldn't afford to touch. Scholarship deadlines are circled in red. Escape plans disguised as opportunity. Connor, my little brother, had been pacing the living room for 20 minutes, kicking a deflated soccer ball against the wall with a dull thud, thud, thud. The kind of rhythmic annoyance that only a bored 12-year-old can perfect when he's silently begging for attention, but too proud to ask for it. I should have looked up right then. I should have seen the shadow behind his eyes when he asked. Maybe then I would have understood what was coming for all of us. But I didn't. I just kept highlighting application deadlines, not realizing I'd just heard the first warning bell of a disaster that would take years to fully unfold. I just said something dumb like, "Because lying hurts people, Connor." He paused. "Not if they never find out." I remember turning toward him then, some part of me tugged to attention by the way he said it. Not snarky or rebellious like you'd expect from a middle schooler testing boundaries. No, he was genuinely asking, like someone floating a new idea, like he was weighing it logically. I think I laughed, like an idiot. "Just don't lie, man. It's not worth the trouble." And that was that. He nodded once, then went upstairs. I went back to my brochures. At the time, it barely registered. Just a weird thing your younger sibling says when they're trying to sound grown up. If I'd known what was coming, I would have written it down. Called it day one. It was a few weeks later that I found the bird. I was taking the trash out when I noticed something near the side gate, a flash of color against the grass. It was a robin, wings stiff, head lolled unnaturally. Its beak was coated in something green. Crumbs of what looked like rat poison littered the ground nearby. I stood there for a long time, just staring at it. Something about the stillness of that tiny body made my skin crawl. I'd seen dead animals before, roadkill, the occasional raccoon when the city forgot to do pickups. But this felt deliberate, arranged. I walked back inside, still holding the trash bag. Connor was at the table, eating cereal and scrolling through YouTube on his phone. "You see anything weird by the gate?" I asked. He didn't even glance up. "Nope. There was a bird out there, dead." A pause, then, "So?" "There's poison on it." Connor spooned cereal into his mouth, chewed slowly, then between bites. "Maybe it was dumb." "Dumb?" "For eating it. There's a reason it's called rat poison, right? Not bird poison." That's when I knew. He wasn't confused or surprised or disturbed. He was making jokes. I took a step forward. "Connor, did you put poison out there?" Finally, he looked at me. His face was completely blank. I wanted to see if it worked. No shame, no guilt, just pure clinical interest, like he'd run a science experiment and was mildly annoyed I'd interrupted before he could jot down the results. I didn't tell our mom. God, I should have. But she was already working 2 jobs, falling asleep on the bus, barely scraping by enough to keep the lights on. I remember watching her one night, hunched over a pile of bills at the kitchen table, rubbing her temples with red-rimmed eyes. I thought about adding, "Hey, your youngest son might be a sociopath," to her plate, and I just couldn't. So I decided to fix it myself. I was 18, just old enough to know how little I actually knew. I bought a few books on parenting kids with behavioral issues, dog-eared every chapter about emotional regulation, consequences, positive reinforcement. I built a little structure for Connor, chores, rewards, punishments. I even set up weekly talks where we'd sit down and go over how he was feeling. He'd nod a lot, say things like, "I understand," and "I'll do better." His face would stay blank the whole time, but I clung to the words. Because that's what progress looked like in the books, right? For a while, things seemed okay. He kept his room clean. No more dead animals. He even joined a soccer team at school, and I thought, maybe this is working. Then came the pool incident. It was a Saturday afternoon. The local community center packed with screaming kids and lifeguards who looked 2 minutes away from quitting. I was texting a friend from work when I realized Connor hadn't come back from the snack bar. 15 minutes, 20. I got up, started checking around, and that's when I heard the banging. It was coming from the janitor's closet near the locker rooms. Fast, frantic pounding. I rushed over and yanked the door open. A little girl stumbled out, maybe 5 years old. Her eyes were wide and red-rimmed, and she was soaked in tears. She ran past me without a word. Inside, I found Connor, leaning casually against a shelf of cleaning supplies, arms folded. "What the hell, Connor?" He shrugged. "She followed me in. I thought it'd be funny." "Funny? Relax, she's fine. You locked her in a closet." "She wasn't locked. The door's old, it jams." I grabbed his arm and pulled him out. "You think this is a game?" He stared at me, no fear. "If it was wrong," he said, "why was it so easy?" That night, I sat on the floor of my bedroom, staring at the ceiling, thinking about that bird, that girl, the way Connor watched people, not with interest, but with calculation, like he was collecting data, like he was mapping out how the world worked, piece by piece. That's when I started calling around. Therapists, pediatric psychologists, anyone who talked to me without insurance. Most were booked or didn't work with kids Connor's age. But eventually I found one. Dr. Mehta, a soft-spoken woman who ran a tiny practice out of a converted duplex near the library. She had a sliding scale and a patient list that was miraculously open. Convincing Connor to go wasn't hard. He seemed amused by the idea, like it was just another puzzle to figure out. Dr. Mehta was kind, but she didn't flinch when I told her what had happened at the pool. She just nodded and said, "We'll start with the basics." I also enrolled Connor in jiu-jitsu at the local rec center, figuring maybe he needed an outlet, something structured and physical. It was expensive, but I picked up extra shifts at the grocery store. I told myself if I just tried hard enough, did enough, I could still help him. For a while, it seemed like I had. He stopped getting in trouble, his grades improved, he started making jokes that sounded almost normal. At his third session, Dr. Mehta told me, "He's opening up a little. It's a start." I let myself believe it, until she called me in, unannounced, 2 months later. Her voice on the phone was tight. "I need you to come in today, alone." I drove over on my lunch break. When I walked into her office, she looked pale. "I wanted to give it time," she said, "to see if there was something real beneath the surface. But Ethan, your brother's not improving, he's adapting." I didn't understand. "What do you mean?" She opened a file on her desk, notes, session logs. "He's telling me exactly what I want to hear. Not sometimes, every time. He mirrors my tone, my body language. He mimics empathy, but never feels it. When I ask him how he thinks others feel, he recites phrases like, 'That must be hard for them,' but there's no connection, no discomfort, no guilt." I sat back in my chair, numb. She continued, "Ethan, I've worked with emotionally disturbed youth for 15 years. Your brother, he's one of the most skilled manipulators I've ever seen, and he's only 12. I didn't speak. "He doesn't want to get better," she said gently. "He wants to get away with it." That night, I found Connor in the kitchen, pouring a glass of milk. He looked at me over the rim of the glass and said, "She told you, didn't she?" I said nothing. He smirked. "She's not very hard to read." I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I just want to help you, Connor." He tilted his head, studying me like I was a strange animal. "Why?" "Because you're my brother." He drained the glass, wiped his mouth, and walked past me. "Maybe that's your problem." I wish I could end this part of the story with some triumph, some turning point where things finally shifted for the better. But the truth is, that night was when I realized I was out of my depth. I wasn't just dealing with a troubled kid. I was standing in the eye of a storm, and the winds were starting to rise. And for the first time, I wasn't sure if I could hold it all together. It had been a quiet year. Connor was 16 now, taller, leaner, and far too charming for someone I knew had a darkness curling inside him like smoke. He played guitar, smiled at neighbors, made the honor roll. If you didn't know him, you'd think he was turning a corner, that he'd grown out of whatever it was that used to gnaw at him like a sickness. But I knew better. He still talked in mirrors, practicing lines with different facial expressions. He still killed bugs for sport, dissecting them like puzzles. And worst of all, he'd learned how to wear people like costumes, say the right things, apologize without meaning it, use their sympathy as leverage. When he told me he had a girlfriend, I remember this sick, fragile kind of relief blooming in my chest. Maybe this is it. Maybe someone's finally reaching him. Her name was Haley. She was 17, soft-spoken, and polite to the point it made you wonder what she was hiding. I didn't ask many questions when she first came over, just watched the way she looked at Connor, like he was some magnetic mystery only she could solve. It made me nervous. But then again, everything about Connor did. The night it happened, I was in my room finishing a paper for community college. Our mom was pulling another double at the diner, and Connor had Haley over after school. They were watching a movie in the living room, laughing too loudly at things that weren't funny. Around 9 p.m., heard a scream. Not the kind from a horror flick. This was real. I bolted downstairs. The living room lights were off. Connor's laptop was open on the coffee table, paused halfway through some Netflix original. The blanket on the couch was twisted on the floor like someone had tripped over it, and down the hall I heard her sobbing. I pushed open the bathroom door. Haley was on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, shirt torn at the collar. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks like ink. Connor was standing over her, arms raised defensively. "She's overreacting," he said, like he was bored. "We were just messing around." Haley looked up at me with this wild, pleading expression, like I was her last lifeline. I grabbed Connor and shoved him against the wall. "What the hell did you do?" He rolled his eyes. "Jesus, Ethan. She said it was okay. Then she freaked out." "No, I didn't," Haley screamed, trying to cover herself with her arms. He pinned me. He wouldn't stop. I told him no." That was all I needed to hear. I helped her up, got her a hoodie from the laundry basket, and walked her home in silence. She didn't say much, just kept repeating, "I didn't think he'd be like this," over and over, like a broken prayer. That night, I sat on the porch until Mom got home. She looked like she always did after a long shift, worn to the bone, eyes bloodshot, fingers stained with coffee and dish soap. I didn't even let her take off her shoes before I told her what happened. She just stared at me. "Ethan, are you sure?" I wanted to scream. "She said no. I heard her." "But Connor said they were just messing around," she said slowly. "And Haley's, maybe she misread something. I mean, are you positive it wasn't a misunderstanding?" "Mom, he assaulted her." Her hand flew to her face. "I can't deal with this right now, Ethan. I can't. Not tonight." She walked past me and collapsed onto the couch. I stood there, cold all over, watching her tremble. Not because of what Connor did, but because she couldn't bear to see it. Haley filed a report the next day. Her parents were furious. They made sure she had a lawyer, a counselor to process what happened. I offered to testify, gave them everything I remembered. It didn't take long for Connor to retaliate. First, it was at home. He told Mom I was trying to ruin his life, that I'd always hated him, that I was obsessed with Haley, jealous that someone liked him and not me. Then he moved to school. Connor had always been magnetic, popular in that fake, easy way that made kids admire him without knowing why. He used it like a weapon. He told his friends Haley was unstable, that she had a history of lying, that I was some creepy older brother who'd always tried to keep him from having a life. He spun his own damn victim narrative, and people bought it. Within a week, Haley was being called a slut online. Anonymous posts on Instagram, TikTok edits mocking her. Her locker was defaced with a red marker. Liar. I started finding notes in my backpack. Stay out of it. She's not worth it. Nobody believes you. The hearing was closed to the public. Just me, Haley, her parents, Connor, our mom, and a few officials. Connor wore a button-up shirt like he was heading to church. He even cried when the judge asked him if he understood the charges. Fake tears. Perfectly timed. Haley read a statement. Her voice cracked 3 times, but she kept going. I gave mine next. Described what I saw, what I heard, the bathroom, the fear on her face. Then Dr. Maida showed up. I didn't even know she'd been subpoenaed. She sat straight-backed and calm, detailing the early sessions. How Connor mimicked empathy, how he'd learned to manipulate every adult who tried to help him. She didn't say the word psychopath, but she didn't need to. Connor's lawyer objected halfway through. Speculation, they said. He was just a child. The judge didn't dismiss her testimony, but I could tell it rattled the room. In the end, they didn't send him to juvie. They called it a gray area. Not enough physical evidence. Conflicting accounts. But they gave him probation, mandatory therapy, regular check-ins. To him, it was a slap on the wrist, a joke. To Haley, it was a dagger in the chest. The campaign that followed was brutal. Connor and his friends flooded social media with clips of her, laughing in old videos, photos where she wore shorts or crop tops. They edited captions to make it look like she was flirting with everyone. Haley the liar started trending in our school's private Discord server. One post read, "Funny how she was fine until she didn't get her way." Another, "Ethan's just mad his brother's more of a man than he'll ever be." Mom tried to stay neutral. "You both need to calm down," she said one night, like this was a sibling rivalry, like Haley hadn't nearly been raped, like I hadn't watched Connor become something monstrous right in front of her. I told her she was in denial, that she was enabling him. She slapped me. It wasn't hard, but it said everything. "Don't talk about my son like that," she said, tears in her voice. I just stared at her. "I am your son." Haley stopped coming to school 3 weeks later. She dropped out, finished her senior year online. I heard through a friend she'd moved to her dad's house in another district. I sent her a message once, just, "I believe you. I always will." She never replied. I didn't blame her. The last time I saw Connor smile, It was when someone tagged him in a meme about girls who cry wolf. He laughed so hard he had to wipe his eyes. "Kids are so dramatic," he said. I walked out of the room before I could do something I'd regret. I tried to hold everything in, tried to focus on school, on work. But something inside me had shifted. I couldn't pretend anymore. Couldn't explain this away. I had proof now, not in a file, but in every look, every smirk, every twisted, calculated word that came out of his mouth. And worse than that, nobody else saw it. They just saw Connor, talented, funny, misunderstood. And I was the bitter older brother, the jealous one, the liar. But I wasn't done. If they weren't going to stop him, I would, whatever it took. I knew things were getting worse when I caught our mom crying in the kitchen. She was sitting at the table, head in her hands, the cordless phone still buzzing against the counter. Her apron from the diner was balled up beside her like a flag of surrender. "Mom?" I asked quietly. "What happened?" She didn't look up, just slid a paper across the table. Termination notice. Her manager said she'd missed too many shifts. The court dates, the calls from the school, the drama at home. It was too disruptive for the restaurant's image. I didn't say anything. What could I say? We were already barely making it. My part-time job at the bookstore covered groceries, maybe utilities. She was the one keeping the roof over our heads. And now, "I gave everything to that place," she said, voice cracking. "Worked double shifts, never complained. They didn't even let me clean out my locker." Connor walked in 10 minutes later whistling, saw the paper, blinked once and said, "Guess you finally get some rest." I wanted to hit him. Instead, I walked out. That night, I opened a Google Doc and titled it, "Connor Behavioral History Confidential." It felt ridiculous, like I was writing a school essay on my own brother. But the moment my fingers hit the keyboard, something shifted in me. The hesitation I'd carried for years, protecting him, justifying him, believing he might change, started to burn away. I went back to the beginning. Age 10, asked why people didn't lie more. Age 12, poisoned a bird to see if it worked. Same year, locked a 5-year-old girl in a closet and laughed when she cried. Age 13 to 14, manipulated the therapist into believing he was improving. Age 16, assaulted Haley, denied everything, initiated campaign to discredit her. Then I added everything in between. Screenshots of fake apology texts he sent me, quotes from therapy sessions, notes from Dr. Mehta. I messaged her to ask if she'd contribute anything unofficial. She said she couldn't share clinical files, but she didn't stop me when I recounted what I remembered. I wrote for hours. By the time I stopped, it was nearly 4 a.m., and the document was over 30 pages long. But it still wasn't enough. Haley was the last person I expected to hear from again. She texted me out of nowhere. "Do you still believe me?" I answered instantly, "Always." She sent a location pin for a library across town. I met her that afternoon. When I saw her, I barely recognized her. Haley used to be sunlight and soft denim. Now she looked like a ghost of herself. Paler, thinner. Her hoodie sleeves pulled tight around her fists. She didn't waste time. "There are others," I blinked. "What?" "Girls from church camp, the school choir, online. They all thought he was charming, funny. Then, things changed." She pulled out her phone and opened a folder. Screenshots, emails, voice memos, DMS. One girl said Connor had cornered her in the science lab during cleanup duty. Another described how he pressured her into sending photos. One had a recording. Connor's voice unmistakably cold, saying, "No one's going to believe you over me." Haley's hands were shaking as she scrolled. "I didn't know how bad it was," she whispered. "I thought it was just me, that I was the stupid one. But when I started talking to them, it all lined up." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. "We need to put this together," I said. She nodded. "I already started." Over the next 2 weeks, we built a case. We met in secret. My room, the library, the back corner of a coffee shop that didn't ask questions. Haley brought stories, screenshots, Instagram tags, group chat logs. I dug through every digital footprint I could find. Connor's old Reddit posts, text history with mutual friends, messages I'd forgotten he'd sent. I emailed his old soccer coach, who admitted Connor was good with the younger girls, but said nothing because he never technically crossed a line. Another classmate said Connor had once dared someone to kiss a freshman at a party. As a joke. It wasn't a joke. We pieced it all together. Quotes, evidence, timelines, first-hand accounts. We created a master file, labeled everything, cross-referenced names and dates. By the time we were done, it was nearly 70 pages. Haley called it the Connor Report. I just called it the truth. And then came the hard part. What do you do with a monster when no one's willing to call him one? You shine a light. I started with his probation officer. I printed out the full report, dropped it into a manila envelope, and walked it into the office myself. The receptionist looked at the name on the front, gave me a sharp look, but took it. Next, his therapist. I made a copy and delivered it to the clinic Dropbox. I didn't need to talk to her. I just needed her to see. Then, school. This part terrified me. I uploaded a PDF copy to an anonymous email and sent it to the entire school staff list. Teachers, administrators, counselors. I included a line at the top. If this is the kind of student you protect, maybe you don't deserve to teach. Then I posted the link on the senior class group chat and the alumni server and the subreddit, and I didn't sign my name. It spread like wildfire. By the end of the day, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Some people were angry. You're just trying to ruin his life. Others were horrified. I had no idea. He used to date my cousin. That video, I feel sick. Within 48 hours, Connor's perfect little world collapsed. He was suspended, pending investigation. Half his friends unfollowed him. The ones who stayed posted vague tweets like, "People make mistakes, and witch hunts help no one." His girlfriend, yeah, apparently he had another one, dumped him via Instagram story. Mom confronted me that night. "Did you do this?" I didn't deny it. She stared at me like I'd slapped her. "You're tearing this family apart." "No," I said, "he did. I just refused to pretend anymore." She looked so tired, but I didn't feel sorry, not anymore. Connor didn't speak to me for 3 days. Then late one night, I came home from work and found him sitting in the dark, waiting on the bottom stair. Hoodie up, phone in his lap. "You really think this changes anything?" he asked. I didn't answer. He stood slowly, walking up to me until we were eye to eye. "You have no idea what I'm capable of." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I locked my bedroom door that night, for the first time in years, not because I was scared of what he might do, but because I finally understood how deep his control went and how dangerous people become when they start to lose it. The call came 2 weeks after we sent out the Connor report. It was a cold Thursday. I was scraping frost off the car windshield when my phone buzzed in my pocket. The voice on the other end was from the Office of Juvenile Services. They'd reviewed the materials, spoke to Connor's probation officer, therapist, school administrators. They called it a pattern of escalating behavior consistent with high-risk conduct disorders. And then they said the words I hadn't dared to believe I'd hear. "We're recommending residential treatment." The facility was about an hour away, tucked into a wooded part of the state where the trees made it feel more like a retreat than a correctional center. But I'd read enough. I knew what it was, a secure place for kids who'd crossed too many lines, hurt too many people, and still thought they were right. Our mother took the news like someone had knocked the air out of her, just stared at the kitchen counter, nodding as if her body was obeying out of muscle memory. He's not dangerous," she whispered, more to herself than anyone. I didn't say anything. She looked at me with tears beginning to gather at the corners of her eyes. "He's still my son." "I know," I said. "He's mine too." And then she did cry, loud and messy and full of all the denial she'd swallowed for years. We drove him to the facility the following Monday. Connor sat in the back seat, arms folded, refusing to look at either of us. His duffel bag sat beside him, mostly hoodies, sneakers, notebooks. I'd helped him pack, not because he asked, but because I knew he wouldn't. No one spoke for most of the ride. Only when the trees thickened and the road turned gravel did Connor mutter, "You really think this is going to fix me?" I didn't flinch. "I don't know, but it's a start," he scoffed. "You're so desperate to play hero." Mom said nothing. She gripped the wheel so tight I thought it might crack. We pulled into a long driveway and parked in front of a plain brick building. A nurse met us at the entrance, clipboard in hand. Another staffer took Connor's bag. He resisted a bit, tugged at the strap, muttered a few curses, but followed them inside. Right before the door shut, he turned to me, eyes narrowed, jaw tight. "This isn't over." And then he was gone. The silence in the car on the way home felt different. The weeks that followed were the first ones in years where I didn't feel like I was holding a live wire in my chest. Haley came back to school, not all at once and not without fear, but she showed up. The same girl who'd been chased off campus by whispers and stares walked into homeroom with her head up and her voice steady. And she wasn't alone. People had read the report, had seen the patterns. Some apologized. Others quietly distanced themselves from Connor's name, like it was radioactive. She joined a support group, started painting again. Sometimes we'd text. Not like before, not like friends, but like two people who'd stood on the same cliff and lived to talk about it. Our mom got a new job, office work this time. Not great pay, but stable hours and kind coworkers. She still looked tired sometimes, but there was something softer around the edges of her voice. A kind of honesty I hadn't heard from her in a long time. I started community college full-time. Took a course on psychology, not because I wanted to become a therapist, but because I needed to understand, needed to make sense of what Connor was and what he wasn't. Some nights I still lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd done the right thing. If there was more I could have done earlier. If I'd pushed too hard, waited too long. But those questions never led anywhere useful. We visited Connor every Sunday. At first, he didn't talk much, just stared out the window or answered questions with shrugs and sarcasm. But over time, things shifted. The facility didn't coddle him. They challenged him, made him earn privileges, held him accountable. He didn't like it, but he didn't break. 3 months in, he started asking questions. Why do they make us do group work? Why do I need to talk about feelings with strangers? He hated the therapy journals, but filled them anyway. He rolled his eyes at role-play exercises, but stopped laughing halfway through. And then, one day, after 6 months, he asked for a private visit with me. They brought us into a small side room. 2 chairs, 1 window, no cameras, just a staffer outside in case anything went wrong. Connor sat down, leaned back, and stared at me for a long time. I'm still pissed at you, he said. I nodded. I figured. You ruined everything. I didn't respond. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. But the thing is, he hesitated, it's not like I didn't know something was wrong. I just didn't care. Then he added, some of the stuff they're doing here, it's not all bull, parts of it. I don't know. Maybe it's worth trying. It wasn't an apology, but it was the first crack in a wall I thought might never break. 9 months in, the staff called a family meeting. They said Connor had met several of his milestones, that he was showing moderate emotional insight and improved behavior consistency, that he might be ready for a monitored return home within the next 60 days. I didn't know how to feel. Hopeful? Wary? Terrified? We agreed to it, slowly, with limits. Therapy would continue. Probation wouldn't lift for another year. One misstep, and he'd go back. But he came home, quieter than before, like someone walking barefoot across glass. He didn't pretend to be cured, didn't flash fake smiles. He just tried. And for now, that was enough. The night before classes resumed for him, we sat on the back porch, watching the sun disappear behind the neighbor's trees. He sipped Sprite from a can. I watched a squirrel dig at the same patch of grass it always did. Do you think people like me can change? He asked suddenly. I looked at him. Really looked. His eyes were the same color as mine, just darker, deeper. I think you'll always have to work harder at it, I said honestly. But yeah, I think you can choose to be better. He nodded once, didn't say anything else. We just sat there. People think exposing a monster ends the story, but they're wrong. The truth doesn't fix everything. It doesn't erase pain or rebuild trust overnight. It just opens the wound wide enough to clean it. Some days I wish I hadn't been the one to pull the bandage off. I lost friends. I lost sleep. I nearly lost my family. But I found something else. A kind of peace that doesn't come from pretending everything's fine, but from knowing that, finally, we're facing what's real. And maybe, just maybe, that's how healing begins. If you made it this far, thanks for riding with me. If you love real, messy, emotional stories like this, go ahead and hit subscribe. There's always another confession waiting in the backseat.